Hey everyone, what if we told you that you could live forever? No, it's not a myth. Welcome to the Bible and history. It's just one of the many perks of being an immortal god. And these aren't your typical gods, though. They hang out on a mountain made of gold, drink nectar, throw epic parties, and when they get bored, they have a tendency to meddle in human affairs. Yes, we're talking about the Greek gods, but there's more to Mount Olympus than meets the eye. These gods have secrets, so let's take a tour of their most prized possessions and find out what those are. Grab your golden chariot because we're going to visit some seriously stunning places along the way. The Nectar and Ambrosia Buffet. Okay, so the food is free. If that doesn't convince you to move in, we don't know what will. Nectar and ambrosia were the foods of choice for the Olympian gods. Nectar was their wine of choice, often served during feasts, and ambrosia was what kept them looking eternally youthful. According to Homeric hymn number 2 to Aphrodite, ambrosia keeps us from getting old and ugly, so count us in. But there's a catch here. Only the gods are allowed to eat this stuff. If any mortal so much as touches ambrosia or nectar, they'll be struck dead. But don't worry. You won't even need to cook because there's a whole host of servants whose job it is to keep the buffet table piled high with snacks. Speaking of servants, next up is the palace kitchen. Who do you think is cooking all this delicious food? Well, the answer is slaves. The Greek gods loved having parties, and that means there's a lot of catering required. For example, when Zeus decided to throw a party for the gods after the Titan War, he chained up 50 beautiful youths, both male and female, and forced them to be his servants. Even though these poor guys had a pretty cushy gig compared to some of the other slaves in Greek mythology, let's face it, it's still a huge downer. Plus, if you make a mistake, you might just get turned into dinner. Remember that time he accidentally gave the wrong cup to Heracles during the Trojan War and almost cost the Greeks the victory? Zeus got so pissed he threw her in the dungeon for 5 years. Next up is the armory. Now, if you're going to be throwing lightning bolts around, you've got to be careful. That's why Zeus keeps his weapons in a locked armory. But who guards this super secret stash? None other than the giants Camp and Alcyoneus, and they stand guard outside the doors day and night, making sure nobody gets in. And while Zeus's weapon of choice is lightning, Hades has something a little different up his sleeve. Instead of lightning, he travels via the rivers of the underworld, riding his black chariot pulled by 4 black horses. Not exactly subtle. Now we know what you're thinking. All this talk of cool chariots has really got us wanting one. Luckily for you, there's an entire stable full of chariots just waiting for you to drive. Well, technically, they're reserved for the gods, but they're never actually used. Why? Because the gods either fly through the air or travel by boat. Chariots are so last millennium. For example, Hermes is rarely seen without his winged sandals, allowing him to move swiftly between realms. In fact, if you see a pair of winged sandals lying around, you better steer clear. They're said to be cursed. Anyone who tries to put them on ends up disappearing forever. As for boating, well, let's just say the gods like their watercraft just the way they like their men, big and beautiful. Poseidon's chariot is pulled by seahorses, and he likes to drive it through the ocean, stirring up storms whenever he feels like it. Hades has a similar chariot, but he prefers to use it to barrel through the river Styx, but maybe you'd prefer to stick to land. After all, there's no shortage of cool palaces to explore. Take, for example, Apollo's place in Delphi, and it's home to the famous Oracle of Delphi, but it's also just a great spot to relax. We mean the place is surrounded by mountains and olive groves. You can't go wrong. Plus, you can check out the Asamart alone on the columns. Each pillar is carved with scenes from Greek mythology. Like the time Apollo and Athena competed for the patronage of the city of Athens. Spoiler alert, Athena won. Or maybe you'd rather head over to Demeter's palace. She's not there very often, though. When she's in town, the place is buzzing with activity as farmers across the land prepare for the harvest festival in her honor. But you'll probably want to stay away when she's in a bad mood, like the time her daughter Persephone was kidnapped by Hades. She was so pissed that she turned the earth into a barren wasteland. That's right, Mother knows best. And finally, there's Hephaestus' workshop. This guy is the god of blacksmiths, so you can bet he's got a killer forge. He uses it to create everything from magical weapons to golden statues. In fact, he made Pandora's box with the help of Athene, and we guess that explains why she felt the need to include a picture of Hephaestus on that list of horrible things you should never do. Now, before you pack your bags and move to Olympus, let us tell you that there are a few downsides to living in the home of the gods. For one thing, you have to deal with their parties, and we're not talking about your standard toga party. These guys know how to throw a bash, and sometimes that means staying up late to dance the night away. Not your thing. Second, the gods get pretty competitive. Remember the time Poseidon, Hades, and Zeus drew lots to see who would get to rule which part of the universe? Yeah, things can get pretty tense, not to mention all the times they argue about who's the most powerful. Thanks to their infighting, the Titans were able to launch a full-on attack on Olympus, and the only reason the gods won the war is because they teamed up. Otherwise, they'd probably all be practicing archery with golden apples instead of hurling lightning bolts. Oh yeah, and then there's the problem of pesky mortals. You know, since the gods like to hang out on top of Mount Olympus, they're pretty close to the mortal realm, so it's easy for humans to stumble upon their domain. And when that happens, they tend to cause chaos, like the time Heracles climbed Olympus to retrieve a magical horse. Or the time Dionysus went to Egypt to get his goat back and ended up starting a cult in the process. Don't look at us like that. You wouldn't believe the kind of trouble these mortals got the gods into. Finally, you can't forget about the monsters. Sure, the gods take care of most of them, but every once in a while one slips through the cracks, and when that happens, you're usually the one who has to deal with it. So maybe living on Mount Olympus isn't all it's cracked up to be. Sure, the parties are awesome, but the fighting, the meddling mortals, and the monsters, not so much. Not to mention you'll never get to experience the joys of a good old-fashioned toga party. Now you need to watch what actually killed the Greek gods, or have a look at why Roman gods are superior. Thank you for watching.